All right. Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to the Mental Toughness and Body Show. My name is Rob Evans, and I am so excited. I've got a very special guest here today. It's Dr. Paul Cribb. Hi, Paul. How are you?
G'day, Rob. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Now, I wanted to be part of Paul's environment today. So my background here is the beautiful view of the beach I've got, and because Paul's in sunny North Queensland and I'm in the cold, dirty part of Australia at the moment, poor old Victoria. Now, I wanted to just briefly talk about how I came to know Paul, and I don't want to steal Paul's thunder. I've got a couple of questions around Paul's background and everything, but I met you, Paul, back in 2012, so 8 years ago now.
Yes.
And I can't remember what drew me into you now. Obviously, I came to one of your courses, and I've always had this desire to grab more knowledge about nutrition and just understand it more for my body, but as well to pass that on to clients. And after that, I think that was a 3-day. Was that a 3-day or a 2-day? I can't remember.
Yes, we have 2 and 3-day courses, or we did used to when it was face-to-face, yes.
Yeah. So I think, the old days. And from that moment on, I have lived there. Well, you're the owner of Metabolic Precision, mpbody.com. And since that day, I suppose I've had the most clarity that I've ever had on I'm on the right pathway to... and you said something that from that day forward, I've always stuck with, and I always talk to my clients about it, and that's optimizing your health. It's not just about the body shape, but it's about optimizing your health as well. So Paul is also my coach, and so we met back in 2012, but it was only this year that, well, it's probably been the last 2 years that I've been looking for a strength and conditioning coach, someone to help me even more with the nutrition side of things. And we might talk about this in a moment, but there's so much rubbish out there. People that do these crash diets and drugs and all kinds of stuff. I'm like, do you know what? I need to find somebody that lives the same sort of philosophy, because I've been living it for like 8 years. And then I thought, I'll ask Paul. And then you said to me, well, if you want the best, why don't you come and work with us? And I said, I didn't think you worked one-on-one with people. So I'm very...
Special ones.
Yeah. So I'm very privileged for that. And I want to, at the end of this, we'll talk about some of my transformation. But I'm just so grateful for having had the opportunity to meet you, and now for you to coaching me personally. I wanted to ask you, what has brought you to this moment where you've created MP Body, and a little bit about your background.
Well, mate, firstly, thank you. That was a heck of an introduction, and I'm quite humbled. And
You're
I'm
welcome.
very privileged that I actually do get to attract quality professionals like you. And I think that's probably why I did get into the industry, to be able to flesh out people like yourself in the industry. The whole idea why we got into this was the PT industry. When I was back doing it, I think I was probably one of the first PTs on the Gold Coast in Queensland many moons ago. In fact, I know we were the only personal trainers, and I couldn't sort of get out of that feeling of being such alone and lost at sort of sea, and there wasn't really any organisations or anything like that. And I always said to myself, man, it'd be great if I had a structure or some sort of science-based process that I know that I could rely on, and a network of people that I could draw on. And because I was watching physiotherapists and myopaths and all these other great professions in the industry, and they had all these organizations and structures, and PTs had nothing.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much, as soon as I got into that position of being able to sort of sit down and put MP together, that's what I did. I did a couple of degrees, and I put myself through a PhD in transformation. I was actually after some answers, really. I'd actually sold up my businesses on the Gold Coast. We ended up with about 6 or 7 studios, and I walked away from that and just put myself through a PhD at uni. And I really wanted to get some more answers. And based on that, I thought, well, if I've got all this information now, why not put it into a system that personal trainers and other professionals can follow, that they know is going to create a process of transformation?
So when you say more answers, were you feeling like, okay, you've been working, so how many years had you been in the industry up to that point?
Oh, I did my third degree. I walked into Victoria University. You'd probably like this, Robert Footscray there, and the
Yeah.
terrific old professor there, Mick Carey. I walked in. I said, I want to do a PhD in with transformation and muscle and fat loss and everything. He goes, well, have you done chemistry? I said, no. He said, have you done biochemistry? I said, no. He said, well, go and do a chemistry degree. And I think that he thought that'd get rid of me, but I did.
Yeah.
I went around the corner and enrolled in Victoria University Footscray campus, and I did an honours degree in chemistry, and then did a bachelor's in biochemistry. So all up, it took me about 6 years.
Okay. So you were still doing PT stuff up
Yes.
to that point? Yeah, right.
Yes, I was. I moved to Melbourne at that point. There, after I'd sort of sold up my businesses on the Gold Coast, and I was lucky enough to have some, probably a handful of really great clients that I started work at. I used to start at work at 6 a.m. and finish at 9 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah.
And I used to remember getting back to my car at 9 o'clock in the morning thinking, what am I going to do for the rest of the day now?
Yeah.
And so a lot of the times I used to just get in the car and drive down to Torquay and surf for the rest of the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I thought, well, this isn't going to last very long. I better do something else. And so that's when I started to go back to university and started on that path of doing what I was doing. And when I did my degrees part-time, obviously working as well. And when I finally got the opportunity to do a PhD, I sat down again with my professors who they got to know me pretty well by then because they knew I was, there for the long haul. And they said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to design my own PhD. I said, because usually with PhD programs, you've got to actually just go wherever someone offers you a program and hope that you like doing it. So I actually sat down and I mapped out my whole PhD program, and then they had to put it to their ethics committee at VU, and to their credit, they really pushed through and helped me get it through. And I was actually able, it was great, Rob. It was something that you would really relate to. You got to actually study exactly what you wanted to learn and what you wanted to know.
Yeah.
The hardest part of that is my supervisors really didn't know where we were going either, because they'd never really done this sort of thing before as well. So they were great. They sort of guided me and helped me along the way there as well.
So when you talked before about, you wanting to know the answers, were you feeling like you'd been in the industry, you were helping people achieve, transformation? Some, I guess, look, to be honest, some would have gotten much better results than others, and maybe some came in and they didn't really get the results. Were you like, I don't understand what physiologically is going on in people?
You know what? It was probably more the psychological, Rob, and the environmental, as you know.
Yeah.
I'd kind of like the muscle and the fat physiology stuff really sort of intrigued me. And we used to do muscle biopsies on part of my thesis was training people and taking muscle samples before and after the 12-week and 24-week programs and assessing.
Sign up for that program.
Yeah, it was until they got to the muscle biopsy, Rob, it wasn't a lot of fun for a lot of the guys. It was funny. It was the biggest, strongest guys were the ones that hated it the most. Yeah. We did a lot of elderly studies as well, and you found the frail old 80s and 90-year-olds.
Like, just cut me up,
no worries. Yeah, just stick it in. No anesthetic. Yeah, no worries. Just put it in. And we had these big, strong, 20-year-olds, and they were throwing up and fainting. And
oh, gee.
But it was more about, as you know, Rob, you could relate to this being in the industry for as long as you have. It's great to see some people get a great result, but you want to know why the others aren't getting a good result.
Yeah.
And you want to address that whole systematic approach about why they're not getting that result. And so probably with a PhD, it's the studies that you see published, and I've got mine published in sports science journals. But it's a tip of the iceberg. It's kind of like the iceberg. You don't actually get to see the rest of how big the iceberg is under the water.
Yeah.
And that's where, with the whole PhD thing, you have to actually learn, okay, if you're going to do a study with people, then you've got to get, why are they turning up? How are you going to make them turn up? How are you going to create an environment that's going to make them stick at this and get a result? And if they're dropping off, why they're dropping off?
Yes.
So there was all those sort of factors involved that really relate to what we do on a daily basis. So that's where it was most intriguing to me to look at, okay, what needs to be in place for someone to embrace a new way of living or way of life, and then staying at it long enough to see a result. And that was a real process that was probably the most intriguing part of the whole thing.
So tell me, your mindset as you were studying and doing your PhD, were in the back of your mind, or it might have been in the front of your mind, thinking, do you know what? I'm going to create MP Body or whatever it was in your mind at the time to help share this? Or was it?
I don't know what I was thinking, Rob, to be honest. It was kind of just, I was just like everyone else at the time. I was, in my 20s, and I was just sort of living that week to week, month to month. And I had a business, and I was, making money week to week and all that sort of stuff. And I kind of always thought about, I wanted to know a bit more and do a bit more, but you never really look at the bigger picture. I was never really academically inclined at school. And in fact, I probably went to school for the sports. People used to ask my father, what does Paul study at high school? And he'd say he majors in football and romance. Yeah. And he's failing both. And so that was a snapshot of what my high school years were like. And I managed to get myself into university, some on a scholarship, believe it or not, on a football scholarship. Otherwise, I don't think I've ever would have got in. And from there, I suppose all that really happened was that I kept finding things that interest me while I was studying along the way. But with your podcast, what this is about, I was thinking about this, and one of the things that probably resonated with me was, I never forget, I enrolled in my chemistry degree when I was 27. And like, chemistry is something that's just like another language to me. I just had no idea. And I remember, and I had my own business, and I actually walked into the university and I paid for my first 3 years up front, because I thought, I'm going to do this because otherwise I know I'll drop out. Yeah. So I paid for the first 3 years. And I remember the ladies, it was the old fashioned signing up at the table and all that sort of stuff, and writing the checks, and used to do all that stuff. And they were like, I was a check for 27 grand or something like that I gave them. And they're like, oh, we've never seen this before. And I thought, I've got to do this, otherwise I'm not going to see it through. Yeah. And the next day was my first lecture, and my first lecture was in basic chemistry. And I remember walking into the lecture theatre before anyone else. It was a lab, actually, and they had the big periodic table, up on the wall, huge one. I'm looking at it for about 10 minutes. I'm trying to, you look at something, you're trying to find the puzzle and work it out and see if it makes sense. Yeah, and I'm sitting there looking at it going, I can't make sense of this. This means nothing to me. Yeah. And then I'm thinking, I've just dropped 27 grand on this. Yeah. Oh, no, and it all just sort of come crashing down, thinking, how am I going to get out of this? How am I going to do this? Because I am way out of my depth here. Like I said, in high school, I couldn't concentrate on anything really unless it had a football with it, or a skirt maybe, which probably isn't the nicest thing to say. But hey, when you're in high school, that's what life's like, and it doesn't prepare you very well for later on. So and I suppose when you're talking about your podcast, Rob, the thing that I probably learnt from that whole experience of putting myself into that is if you can learn how to learn, then you can do anything. Then you can survive anywhere, and you can flourish in anywhere.
That's a great point, because I probably the greatest boss that I ever worked for, Rod Chapman's his name, and he was a little bit controversial, like beautiful, lovely man. But he was a bit controversial amongst his colleagues, because he'd be like interviewing people for a job, and he would say that he would take any person that has done a degree. He didn't care what the degree was, because he says, if you've done a degree, that takes 3, 4, maybe 5 years time. That requires focus and dedication to be able to get through that. So he was looking deeper than the qualification. He was looking for, so what's gone into that to give them, that piece of paper. It's not the piece of paper. It's like what's gone into doing that. Yeah. So that's really powerful. I can really relate to, what you're saying, because I don't know whether you know this, but I used to be a chartered accountant. So I was not a good student. Like I remember going into my HSC year, and I had no idea how I was going to pass English, because it was my worst subject, and I didn't get it. I didn't enjoy reading, but what I was good at was working out where's the formula to get the best outcome. And thankfully, I had a really good English teacher, and English actually ended up being my best result, which is the irony of it. But it wasn't until I went to uni and I started doing things that I enjoyed, because I was into, and you tend to do the things that you are good at. I was only good at maths, and I liked the business side of things, hence going down the accounting path. But at the same time, I was also, started working out on my body and stuff. And then when I was 40, discovered what I really wanted to do. But you don't have to be a genius to to start a career in something and look at where you are now. So I mean, well done. I mean, it's just a beautiful transformation, isn't it?
Yeah, life's like that, isn't it? I think it's just a constant evolution. That's the exciting thing about life. I think it's always going somewhere that you haven't been before. And
if you wanted to, because a lot of people don't. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about that coming up, but you can easily do nothing. But if you've got that hunger to keep doing things, then that's, I think, the beautiful thing about life, and you just keep growing. I still feel like I'm at the beginning. I don't know how you feel about your life, but I feel like I'm just at the beginning.
Yeah, look, it's a good way to be, isn't it? I think technology's probably forced us to be like that a lot now, especially in the climate that we're in. I know that through this whole pandemic, we've had to learn a whole new skills. I've had to sit down and, I was always okay on a computer and, running a website and everything, but I've actually had to teach myself how to film, how to edit, how to put videos together. And, that was something I really steered away from doing, but you have to actually force yourself to keep learning new skills.
Yeah, I agree. I did want to ask you briefly, so tell us about your professional career, because you went into, you said football, but not AFL football, though. It was like rugby type footy.
Yeah, rugby league,
yeah. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, look, all through high school, I was going to be a professional football player, wasn't I? I didn't need to study a lot of this stuff because I was going to get graded and play for a great team like the Roosters or Balmain or something like that in Sydney and get a contract and all that. And it didn't really happen because I wasn't quite good enough. I had a brief stint with the Gold Coast Seagulls when they were on the Gold Coast there, but they defunct it and only sort of lasted a few years. I think by the time actually I was about 24, I had that many injuries. I was really beaten up from the training programs that they used to put us through were really tough. And I remember my back actually, by the time I was 25, 26 was that sore. I was a personal trainer and I was really struggling to get through every day. By the time I was actually 28, I could barely stand up and I was trying to work out what the hell was wrong. And I was going to physios and chiropractors, and I finally, because it got to a point where I actually had to stop working because I just had to lay down all the time. My back was so sore and so bad. And I had this great business and it slowly just, dissolved by the time I was 30 to nothing. And I was on the dole. And I finally found after about 18 months, I found a surgeon that come out from the UK. And he agreed they did a discogram, which is injecting dye into the back of your lower discs there. And what they showed, they were completely ruptured. So I'd been walking around for the last 2 years with 2 completely ruptured discs. And I said, well, what do we do? And we said, well, we take them out. And he said, I've only done a 1 level spinal fusion. He said, but with you, I've got to do 2. And I've never done a 2. And I said, oh, okay. What do you reckon? He said, I said, will you give it a go? And he said, yeah. He said, I'll give it a go if you want to do it. And so I did it. So I had my 2 discs removed from my lower back at I think 30 years of age, 29 years of age. And I had 4 titanium cages bolted into my lower back. And I had to do all the rehab and learn to walk and do all that sort of stuff again. And I remember when I got out of the hospital and went and saw him and everything, I sat down, or I didn't sit down, I was laying on the table, and he filled out a form and he gave me a form and he said, well, here. I said, what's this? He said, well, take this to the dole office. And he said, you can get an invalid pension now. He said, you won't have to work anymore. And I sort of looked and I thought, wow.
It's like a death sentence.
I don't want to spend my life doing that. So that was probably a turning point for me. And to be honest, I didn't make a big deal about it. I just sort of left it in the drawer, and I don't think I ever saw it again because it was something that I didn't really want to do. I wanted to go back to university and do what I was doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's all those sort of little life lessons there. And when I was at university doing my own, with this PhD thing, Rob, leading into my professional job, I saw the amount of money that you'd need for a PhD. And usually what the guys do is they get a scholarship. Now, I didn't want to do a scholarship because what a scholarship meant, it meant doing a lot of other things that you didn't want to do. Like you had to do a lot of lecturing and a lot of other stuff that meant part of the scholarship.
Yeah.
So I actually wrote down exactly the PhD I wanted to do, and I sent it off to a number of different companies all around the world. And I sent one off to AST Sports Science in Colorado, just on the whim that they might read it. And the guy actually read it. The CEO of AST Sports Science, which is a big company at the time, he read it. And I'll never forget this, Rob. You're like this. I was sitting in my car in between clients having a snooze as a PT, and I had my big brick phone.
Yeah,
as
yeah,
I did back then.
yeah.
And I remember getting this call, and it was the thick American accent. It's like, hello. I said, hello. And I said, hello, this is Paul D'Elia from EST Sports Science. Is that Paul Cribb? And I'm like, I thought it was one of my mates, and I thought they were jamming me up.
Yeah.
I told him to F off and hung up. And it was actually the president of the company ringing me up to talk about this proposal. And long story short, they hired me sight unseen. I was in Melbourne, and said, well, look, where do you want to do all this research? And I said, well, I've got everything set up here at Victoria University. And they said, great. So they ended up making me director of research for AST. And I actually was a dream job for the next 10 years, where I got to fly around the world, do research, present research, oversee research, publish research. And it ended up being a dream job in a lot of ways.
Yeah, nice move.
Yeah. So again, it was just one of those things that you put yourself out there, and the gods, I suppose. If Paul never picked up that proposal, and we become great friends over the years after that. And he used to fly me everywhere to go to these conferences, and I'd come and see him in Colorado at the offices they had, and that was my boss. So he pretty much left me free rein for 10 years, whatever I wanted to study, whatever I wanted to do. And he was great that way, and I owe him a massive debt. And that's where I got to learn, Rob, all the things now that we do together. Paul was actually, he was sponsoring a number of the world's best drug-free bodybuilders. In the States at the time, there was a very big drug-free bodybuilding movement. There still is. And he had probably 10 in his stable that were these phenomenal athletes. They were great, but they were looking for a nutrition coach that would really give them an edge. And then sort of Paul put them onto me, and I got to do with them all the things that I had in my head that I thought would work, that I thought would be effective, that all the research is showing that this would work.
Yeah.
Supplement timing, nutrient timing, carbs close to the workout, consistent protein, all these sort of little things that we had. And all of a sudden I had these human guinea pigs now that if I said to them that they had to chew a bucket of concrete every day, they'd do it.
Yeah.
So they were great people to work with, because bodybuilders are great. They're like robots. If you tell them what to do, they will follow exactly what to do. And so we got to fine tune a lot of the principles that you and I work with now, so that I got to see how they would work in a real life scenario. And more importantly, if the mistakes were there as well, you got to see what went wrong.
Yes.
So there was all those sort of little things along the way that have sort of led to the creation of what we have with MP. Is one, it's got the very strong science background, but two, it's sort of got that real applied background now. And some people like yourself now, Rob, with what you're doing, you're that applied science of what's going on now with MP. So it's pretty cool. Yeah,
it is cool. I'm interested in, I remember you telling a story, so this would have been back in 2012 probably. I may get the code wrong. It may have been the NFL, where you were working with these, like $1 million athletes and spending
there was a baseballers,
all this time putting together these like meal plans and so forth for them, but they wouldn't follow them. And so I've had the privilege of just in the last couple of years being able to work with some Olympians and like gold medalists and like the absolute phenomenal people. Like their mindset is fantastic, but also like listening into a lot of that, particularly in basketball, and hearing about look, some of these elite athletes are surviving on energy drinks and fast food and their youthful exuberance basically.
Yep.
Where do you think? So, and I've also been working at a local level with some world-class like teams and stuff to try and instill into the coaches that, do you know what? I can't teach you anything about skill or anything like that. I'm working with cheerleading teams, like national cheerleading teams, as my daughters do that. And I say, do you know what? Just have a look around on a competition day and look at the crap that these people are eating. I said, I guarantee you, I will give you a 10 to 20% edge if you've just focused on your nutrition. Forget about your skill. That's about energy. So where do you think there's a fall down in these pro ranks?
I think the first thing that comes down to the athletes that get to that sort of level, they get to that level because they're extraordinarily gifted.
Mm.
And then obviously you don't just get there on talent, but it hasn't become a culture for them leading up through the ranks. And actually, and I'll tell you that a great friend and colleague, Sue Kleiner, Dr. Sue Kleiner, is a dietitian in the States in Seattle, and she's worked with a lot of NFL teams, and we laugh at each other's stories because she says exactly the same thing. She works with these multi-million-dollar athletes that are earning millions of dollars a year, and she can't get them to make breakfast, and to how to do these things because mom's been doing this sort of stuff all the time, and it's just something that's not really ingrained. And so she had to really step back and create all those little skills and drills that people can do in the kitchen just to learn how to cook again. And I think that's a big thing, Rob. I think there's a whole generation of people that have grown up now not being in the kitchen, not thinking that cooking and preparing food is a part of regular day life.
So do you think the coaches don't, I know I'm generalizing here because like just talking to Olympians in the last week and a half, like a whole bunch of them, some of them have had really good nutritional help. But the one thing that when I've heard them say that is it's come from the coach. So do you think there are like coaches that are like just don't see that nutrition has such an important part to play in improving the result on the scoreboard?
I think because coaches in any sort of sport now, you've got to really specialise in what you're doing. And I think a lot of times coaches just don't have the time to specialise in nutrition. That, it might be an interest, but it's because they're so focused on what they're doing, it's very hard for them to be that in depth. And probably the other irony is too, Rob, as you know, it's one thing knowing a lot about nutrition, but it's another thing knowing how to teach it to someone, change their life. And that's a big thing with a coach. First they've got to be highly skilled at delivering the sport or the program they're doing, but then to try and do that with nutrition as well. That's a hard basket, and that's where I suppose they try and handball it to another professional. And if that professional is up to being able to work with a cross spectrum of different people, and that's difficult.
So where do you think we can drive the change there? Does it come down to, I don't know, like, is it the board of directors, for instance? I mean, that's ultimately the top of some of these, say like the ones in the States, like whether it's baseball, NFL or whatever. Is it the manager of the team? Is it like, where does it flow? Because like all of these things, it comes from the top down, doesn't it?
Yeah, look, you're right. I suppose with any organisation, you're spot on. I tend to think it's more, it comes back to the individual and the environment. And as I said, again, look, I'll throw this at you. Compared to the 1960s, today we spend less than 20% of what families did in the kitchen in the 1960s.
Yeah.
The average household now in the US and Australia spends about, less than an hour and a half in the kitchen a week.
Yeah.
Preparing food.
Yeah.
Now, contrast that now to some of the most popular shows on television that millions of people watch across the world are cooking shows. So people on one hand will sit down and this has been confirmed, like some of the highest rating shows, as you know, with MasterChef and all this going on, people will sit for an hour and a half and watch someone cook something they know they will never cook or eat themselves.
That's right. But
they won't go into the kitchen because it's just not, it hasn't been ingrained in what they're doing. And here's the other interesting contrast, Rob, too. Obesity rates. The stats for obesity only really started in the 1980s. And ever since the 1980s, they have just completely increased. Now, we've had more and more information about the perils of obesity and how to combat it and everything, but they keep going up and up and up and up. Now, what correlates with that? The amount of decrease in time we're actually spending in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing that is concerned, Shah and I with the whole fitness industry. Because as you know, with the courses, Rob, Shah sets up a makeshift kitchen and she actually shows how to make like an omelette in 3 minutes and chicken cacciatore in 9 minutes.
Yeah,
and that sort of stuff.
It's really powerful.
Yeah, it blows people's mind because a lot of people just don't realise how easy this stuff is in the kitchen because they haven't done it before. Once you do it, it's easy.
Yeah, that's right.
So to me, when you're talking about that side of things, I think, if some of these athletes, if they saw that, yes, you can make breakfast in less than 3 minutes, you can make chicken cacciatore or whatever else you like to have in 9 minutes, this sort of stuff, if the structures are there and you've got the basic skills.
Yeah.
That's where it needs to start from. Who influences that? Well, it comes down to the family.
Yeah, I guess the parents, yeah.
And then so remember, Rob, because we're getting old now. Yeah. We've come from a generation that our parents probably cooked, but there's a lot of adults now that came from
there's
no
cooking.
Didn't cook.
Yeah.
And even now the generations now, parents don't cook, And so the kids are going to grow up thinking, well, you know, menu log and everything else like that's a way of life now.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, and as soon as here's the other thing, Rob, and I suppose you can tell I'm getting a bit passionate about this now because it's something that's a bit of a claw in my side. As soon as we start to hand over our health to the food manufacturing business.
Oh yeah, we're screwed.
Yeah, and people don't realise, and this is a big smoke screen, that people don't realise that food manufacturing has nothing to do with our health. It has all to do with profit and a bottom line dollar.
Yeah.
And so as soon as people start to buy into, you know, things like menu log and home delivery, they're all a part of life now. Yeah. That's where a lot of our health problems come from. Yeah. And that's where a lot of our performance problems come from.
I saw something.
Yeah, sorry for getting off my.
No, love it. I mean, we could talk all day on this stuff. I saw something interesting a little while ago, which showed that, which was news to me. There's something like, it's either 5 or 6, but I'll say 5. There's 5 companies that make the world's food.
Wow.
And when you look at, like, let's say Nestle, I don't know, that's their proper name, but like Nestle, for instance, you think, oh, well, if I say Nestle to you, like when I was a kid, Nestle, I used to think chocolate.
Yeah.
But of course, well, it's basically a confectionery company but they now make all kinds of different things. And it's just, if you're like hidden under another brand name and you think, oh, well, it's something else. But all of this is coming from the same board, the same directors, the same direction, just different management and business units and stuff. But the ethos isn't, okay, let's maximize people's nutrition. It's like, here's another opportunity that we can use to maximize profit.
Yep. Well, that's right. They're in a business, I suppose, and that's how they got to look. But yeah, when it's sort of cloaked in that whole thing of it becomes a way of life now. And that's something, as you know, with our courses, we always look at, okay, you know, having these things as bonus foods is, you know, that's okay. You know, no one's saying you've got to be, you know, a Spartan monk.
100% anal. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You know, if you want to have a burger every now and then, that's great. Take the kids out for a pizza or whatever. You can't do that now, but, you know, maybe order in on a Friday night. That's okay. But you know that a lot of the research, Rob, and this was something that really opened my eyes, was our brains are the way we're programmed in our brains. For example, there's been a lot of studies where, for example, they would follow, monitor and look at families and do questionnaires with families. Okay, how many takeaways do you have a week? You know, that sort of thing. They'd say, oh, twice a week. It's only twice a week, once a week. And then actually follow them through the months, whatever it is. And then they realize it's 5, 6 times a week. And I said, what do you think? They said, well, we just don't realize. You just don't realize. And this is a lot of the psychology. Our brains are very good at blocking out mistakes. Yeah. Our brains are very good at distorting. Like people think, and again, this is another whole conversation. I know we're going off. People like to think their memories are, you know, snapshots and clear and everything. Yeah. You know, when you get to the research on thought processes and brains, we're just a mishmash of visions and thoughts in our brains, and we can easily put things together the way we want to see them.
That's right.
You know,
we find a way to justify it to ourselves.
Exactly right. And we, not that we're lying a lot of the times, but a lot of times that's what we genuinely think what happened. You know, this was the size of the food I ate, or this is how often I ate something. Yeah. When you really record it, it's not the case.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's another whole dilemma I think that our society is fighting with all the time now, is because we think we might be doing the certain things that are right, when in fact, unless you're tracking and monitoring, then it is actually quite different to tell otherwise.
So if you think about, so we've got, it's around 67%, I think it's 70% in the US, overweight and obesity issues. Do you think that the main issue with that is food and people's lack of education around it, eating too much of the wrong stuff, too much processed, not enough plant-based food, getting the timing wrong?
You know what, Rob, and probably, you know, one of the catch cries I've always taught in my courses is that nutrition is never about food. It's about everything else surrounding the food. It's about our habits, our beliefs, what we've grown up with, what we think is normal. It's all those associations with the food. It's never about the actual food itself. And that's where probably a lot of our problems as families and everything, you know, come from. Like I said, one of the first biggest breakdowns is a lot of families don't cook anymore. Well, they don't cook a lot. And so therefore children growing up think this is normal. And then that's where the problems sort of start to go from there. So there's all those sort of little 1%ers in that side of things. And the other thing is, Rob, is, you know, I've got a PhD in nutritional biochemistry, I could write you out the greatest meal plan on the planet, get all the carbs and the fats completely spot on, hand it to you on an Excel spreadsheet on a platter. How long would the average person follow it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
A day, if that, not even, because there's all those other barriers around that are impeding people. Generally, you stop everyone in the street and you ask them what they know they should be eating more of, and then ask them what they know they should be eating less of, and they'll get it right.
The answer.
Yeah. It's whether they do it or not. That's the
it.
problem. And that's where that's the multi-million-dollar question about actually looking at the whole environmental aspect of why people make the decisions they make when it comes to food, lifestyle, living the way they do.
Yeah, I think, people know that, okay, if I did these things for 90 days, then I would be in a completely different outcome, and I'd really love the outcome of that. But they don't do it. And that's why I love so much working with nutrition now and mindset, because it's easy to go and, look up a workout and go do a workout and that kind of stuff. Not that people get that necessarily right either, but I find that the mindset is just so powerful in driving, why you're going to behave a certain way. Like you and I talked about when you started working with me. What do you want? And tell me why you want it so badly. Because if that's weak, if the why is weak, then it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and that's a big thing, isn't it? A lot of people and I always sort of relate to this. It's I never forget. I was on. We used to do internships, and I was in an exercise phys lab for my first or second year, and we used to test people, stress test people on the treadmill, that sort of thing. And we had this fellow come in, and he wasn't that old, probably late 30s, very overweight. He walked in, he got a brand new pair of running shoes, and he had them in the box, so he ripped them open and he put them on or whatever and got on the treadmill. And I think he was on the treadmill, and they put it up like a 1% incline, and his heart rate just shot up. And my supervisor that was there at the time, because I was just an intern watching, I was a kid, he just slammed the button to stop the treadmill. And the guy looked over and said, "What did you do that for?" He said, "I did that because if I didn't, you were going to die." And he, he looked at him and he said, "Bloody good decision." And really, that's what it means. It comes down to, unless you have that huge warning bell, unless you sit across that from the table from that physician or that doctor, and that doctor says, "Listen, unless you do something, you're gonna die, or you're gonna be in a very bad place." People don't have that why they should be doing something. Yeah. And that's unfortunate in our society that it gets to that. It gets to that where you sit across from that health professional. Unless you do this, you are going to die. Yeah. Unless you stop doing this, you're going to have a massive heart attack, a stroke, or whatever it is. We have to try and work out a way to get people to that point before the big catastrophe is going to happen. Yeah. And that's not easy. No, it's not. It's the biggest conundrum, and some people are successful and others just aren't. They just don't have they have a pretty weak why in many cases. The longer that I work with people, I can pretty much ask them 5 questions, spend like 10, 15 minutes with them, and know whether they're going to be really committed to the program or not, and whether they're going to get the results or not. So Paul, I'm just conscious of the time. There's just a couple of more questions. I wanted to ask you about coaching, because obviously we're both coaches. You coach me. I'm just wondering on what impact coaching has had for your life, coaches that you've had and so forth. Look, I suppose my coaches, I haven't really had a lot of health coaches from that point of view. I probably had some influencing people. The irony is, all through my football years, I ended up being the conditioner of nearly every single football team that I trained. Right. And that was even up to the pretty high levels. I was conditioning and playing in the team at the same time, because I wanted to control what we were doing from a conditioning point of view. But probably more about life balance and great business people that I probably work with. And again, like my boss at AST Sports Science, he sort of taught me a lot about life management and how he approached things. And then the bodybuilders I work with, they taught me a lot as well. The way that they just organised their lives for success because they wanted to succeed at something. And you sort of look at that and go, wow, that's pretty cool. And even I suppose I learned a lot from my wife as well. When I first met Shah, my wife's won 2 world titles in figure shaping 20 years ago. And I remember her telling me the things that she used to do every day just to be able to, get up to win
Yeah.
title, and you sort of look at that from that point of view. And yeah, that's good if you're driven. But then you've got to try and look at, okay, how do you apply some of that skill for your own life and what you're doing? And I think a lot of that comes down to actually wanting to be happier with yourself. And a lot of people talk about that whole moving away from pain and all that sort of stuff. But I think happiness is a big thing in the human brain. Like intrinsically, we want to be happy and we crave happiness.
Yeah.
And we just need a pathway to try and get that sometimes. And sometimes that happiness, Rob, comes from the smallest things, like having a partner that really loves us or is really attracted to us, that sort of thing. And
being able to look at every day and surf.
Yeah, well, that's another thing as well too, especially it's good for your head that way.
I want to go out later and surf.
You'll have to come up, mate. Look like the waves are pretty good at the background there, and you're
just having somebody wax up the board right now.
Don't use wax anymore, mate. We've got deck pads now.
All right. Okay. So tell me, I'm sure people are curious as to know, what would a typical day of like food and exercise look like for you?
Look, again, that's probably the thing. And, you're in our group, our coaching group now, and I posted the other day, one of the guys asked what I eat and said, okay, well, I'll write it down for you and show you. A lot of people think, because when we go to parties and that sort of thing, Rob, like, I never talk about what I do, ever.
Yeah, because people ask me,
I always steer away from it. Sometimes I even lie. Sometimes I'll say I'm an accountant or something like that, just to try and shut them up. Because as soon as you do, you just get on that sort of path where you're talking about stuff that just people don't really want to know about.
Yeah, that's how they cringe.
Yeah, so the whole thing with that is, what I just tend to do is, I'm never a fanatic. Yeah. Because they're the boring people. They don't get invited to parties or anything like that. When you just live with a balance of things, then you can never go too wrong. And like I said, I think you've heard me say this with Sharon and I. There's always chocolate in our house. There's always a bottle of champagne in our fridge, that sort of thing. But it doesn't mean we have it every day, and it doesn't mean we drink it every day.
Yeah.
And that's probably the thing that a lot of people, when it comes back to trying to find that why, there's a lot of people who will say, oh yeah, but if there's chocolate in the fridge, I'll eat all of it. I've got to eat all of it.
Yeah.
So, well, why? What's going on there? If there's a bottle, if I open a bottle, I've got to drink the whole bottle. So, well, why? What's the underlying thing there? There's something obviously driving you to want to drink all that. There's got to be something there. And that's what you've got to really try and get to with people, is find out, okay, if, the extremes that people want to go to. And the other irony is, Rob, is this massive upsurge of the way people eat now, like, as you know, and I'm not dissing how people want to eat, because I think it's fascinating, but the upsurgence in vegan eating in the last 3 to 5 years, that sort of thing. And I remember back when I was a biomed student, I was studying these sort of things, and vegan eating is the most stringent, difficult form of vegetarian eating by far. And it's just like, that's the most difficult. You have to be so organized. You have to be so, regimented with what you're doing. And it really comes, things like intermittent fasting and everything else. It's like, yeah, well, they're all good, but really what it's telling us, when you see these hundreds of thousands of people going after these sort of eating plans like keto and cutting out carbs and all this sort of stuff, they're doing it because they're trying to find an answer. They're trying to find a simple answer to something.
Yeah.
And probably the irony was, and I think I had this conversation about the intermittent fasting with a few people, is that a lot of people follow this because if they think they don't have to eat, then it's one less thing to worry about. So, and some people will, some people think it's going to work, and that's fine, and it might improve what they're doing by making them more aware. But I think that's all a lot of eating programs do, is as soon as an eating program makes you more aware of what you're eating, that's probably the hardest battle with people, is to make them more aware of what they're doing day to day. Yes. Because most people live on habits. 70% of what we do every day is a habit. We don't think. Yeah. So, knocking over that bowl of chips, that packet of chips, those 6 beers at night, it's a habit every night.
Yeah.
You don't even think about it. It doesn't register.
Yeah.
So anytime we look at a plan that starts to make us, okay, if I don't eat at this time, then what do I eat after that? What do I eat after a workout? People start to be aware of what they think they should be eating, and that's always a good thing.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So I've got a big question for you now. So when I've got 2 more questions for you. This year I decided that I wanted to get into the shape of my life and wanted to get that, really defined 6-pack and everything. And like I said at the start, I wanted to go with somebody that I trusted and knew that wouldn't be saying, well, hang on, no, you're eating the wrong foods, the wrong timing, all that kind of stuff. I need you to do this. And so, because I've been living this way for so long, I knew that if I just made some tweaks, then I could get the outcome. But of course, I've never done what I'm trying to do for my body, as we've talked about before. So we don't know exactly how it's going to respond. So I wanted to ask you, so you can tell the whole world, how am I going? Do you think we're about, I think I'm up to about, it's about 25 weeks or something now. I've got 15 weeks to go until my final deadline. How am I traveling?
Mate, let me tell you, you're one of the best students I've worked with. I'll tell you that now, flat out. So we're not even being on camera. That's an honest truth. And one of the things was two reasons. Simply, Rob, is one, you're coachable, and two, you had a very clear goal with what you wanted to do. And that's probably the two essences of what you need to have with people that want to change. You need someone that wants to listen and learn and apply, and obviously they've got to have that really strong driving carrot. At the end there, and you've been absolutely fantastic, and you're doing it through probably the hardest time in human history.
Yeah, I know. There's so many challenges.
Yeah, so that's mate, it is a credit to you, because I know that there's a lot of people that have probably fallen by the wayside, but the fact that you're still running a business now, and you're still trying to hold your business together, and you've got a family to look after as well, and give them attention as well, and you've still hung on to this goal, and that's probably been the thing. And I think you've probably learned a lot about yourself on this process as well. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I think I've always been like very strong and determined, but like I've been this is my 32nd year of training, and I've never achieved the look like sitting here right now. I'm in the best shape that I've ever been in my life.
That's very cool.
And I think, well, why haven't I done that before? And like, you find ways to justify, like we were talking about before, you find ways to justify why I'm not there. But this year I said, you know what? 2020 is my year. This is what I'm going to do. This is why I'm going to do it. And to be honest, I apologize if you can hear. Can you hear the cat meowing in the background?
No, I can't. No, you're right.
He wants to go out. And it actually hasn't been that difficult. And you're right. I have never created a big enough reason as to why I wanted to do it. And I'll tell you this, so one of the most painful exercises that I do now, which I've never done before, is the single leg press. Now, where my leg press machine is, I'm very grateful that I've got my own studio, but on my wall above it, I say dreams come true here. And when I get to that point, the lactic acid is really building up, and you really could easily stop. You could say, do you know what? If you did a poll of 10 people and we said, look, should I stop now? They'd say, yeah, no, look, you've done a lot. You're up early, just stop. I look at that and I think dreams come true here. And in those, those moments where you think, okay, you've got to have a big vision. And then when you need it, it's like, it rolls through really fast, like you see on the movies sometimes, like in a comic strip, for instance. Yeah. And I see myself standing on stage. I see myself tanned up, waxed up, or whatever it is, head, yep, holding the check above my head. The music, the Thunderstruck, AC/DC, Thunderstruck is booming out. 5,000 people are, screaming, clapping, and those streamers are coming out.
That's it.
And I see that when I'm in the pain.
Cool.
Because in order to, in order to achieve what I want to achieve, I have to hurt myself a lot, multiple times a week. And it's counterintuitive to having a healthy life or enjoying it. But you've got to love the training. And one of the things that I picked up from Rochelle Hawkes. Do you remember Rochelle Hawkes? Hockey player, Australian hockey player, gold medalist.
Okay, yep.
She was talking last night, and one of the things that she said that she attributes her success to, and then Ken Wallace, the rower, he agreed with it. He says, always train harder than you play.
There you go.
It makes sense, doesn't it? Because then when you get on the field, it's like, well, it's just what we're doing. And I see this as the same thing. All of those things bring me to this. So to be honest with you, it's really about fine tuning the knowledge and, the timing, and like you giving that extra information about the, how much protein to be taking in here, which is tweaking my knowledge. Some things before, like, this isn't going to mean a lot to people talking, but their metabolic window of eating around our workouts and the 4 meals in the 3 hours. And I always used to think that I had to have an hour's rest after my workout, post-workout, before I ate again. You said, no, you need to be eating, as soon as possible, getting more red meat in, all those sorts of things. And it's just demystified everything. Like my muscles are harder than ever before. I'm leaner than ever before. I'm more tanned than I've ever been before. I've got less hair. I've got less hair on me than I've ever had before. The kids having fun tanning me up and saying,
that's good.
Darken up. So it's a really, really cool experience.
That's a COVID activity, isn't it? It's tanning dad.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Look, one more question before my closing comments. So this has been awesome, Paul. What would your tip be for people right now that I think people are going to come out of COVID? You see it, they're going to be fatter, not fitter. But what would your one tip for people going through COVID right now? Obviously in Victoria, we're doing a lot harder than anywhere else. That you would say to people around the world to say, do you know what? This is what you need to be thinking, saying to yourself, whatever, to help, keeping an eye, improving your health and fitness.
You know what, to be honest, I think with so much pressure and so much stress that people are under, I think the last thing obviously a lot of people think about is working out. Because I think a lot of people do think of working out as being an arduous pain, and it's painful and it hurts.
Maybe we need to rebrand it, Habes. It's work out. Maybe.
Yeah. And that's, you know what, that's pretty close to the bone, because one of the things I know that Shara and I found, I personally, I've struggled working out at home. It's something that I've always gone to a gym because I physically have to remove myself because I work from home and
yep.
It's hard that way. And so I've struggled, and I know that Shara struggled a little bit as well with the not being able to, she's a very social butterfly, as you can imagine. So what I virtually did was just take the pressure off and just go and do something and just start moving. And it doesn't matter if it's particularly easy, and just make sure that you do it each day and you build in and you just start enjoying what you're doing. So for instance, I remember when we ordered, one of the laughs I put on Facebook the other day was our gym gear finally arrived, and I ordered it the first week of March.
Good in March, yeah.
Yeah, and the delivery driver gave me a gobful. He said, like, the gyms are open now, don't you know? And I didn't have that to tell him. I ordered this 4 months ago.
I've been standing here for 3 months. Thanks very much.
And all we had for months was just like a TRX band and a couple of rubber bands. And I'm like a gym guy. I'm thinking, how do I do this?
Yeah, and they're waiting.
It just made us realise that you just got to go back and just start moving, start stretching, just start doing all the basic little things.
Yeah.
And just start enjoying the feeling of moving. And that's probably the biggest thing that I think a lot of people that are either new to exercise, or everyone's exercised in the past and they've fallen off the wagon and want to get back into it. And they've always got that in the back of their mind, oh, this is going to hurt. I'm going to be sore tomorrow. I'll put it off. And it's just like, no, just take the pressure off. Just start
move.
Moving. Yeah, just get that band and just start doing something with it. Just start moving it, start stretching it, just start. Get a couple of exercises off YouTube, for God's sake, and just start and just enjoy it. Don't try and make it too regimented. Don't try and make it too hard. Don't try and make it so that it's going to be a big, overwhelming thing, because a lot of people that get OCD with this sort of stuff do that. They get distressed because they think they can't make these great workouts. It's just like, you've got to just start moving first and getting functional first.
Yeah.
And then just let it take its course. Every day, every week, you'll just get a little bit better. And then all of a sudden, you'll start to do those full-blown workouts that you probably never thought you would do. It's the people that try and jump into those full-blown workouts right from, doing nothing.
Yes.
That's the hardest part, and that's the dread that people have. People have to fall in love with movement and exercise again and make it an enjoyment. That's probably the biggest tip I can give you.
Yeah, that's great advice, Paul. Fantastic. Hey, listen, I appreciate your time so much today.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you as a coach. Like I say, I think you can put down those significant people in your life that have really had an impact on your life. And you're certainly one of those for me. I mean, 8 years ago, my life completely changed for the better. And certainly what you're helping me with right now is helping me achieve, the body and health to go with that, not just to look good, but to feel good and be energized and just feel amazing. And you've done that for me. So grateful for having you in my life, having you as my coach. And thanks so much for sharing your insight today. We could talk for weeks on this. I love the science and everything that you do. So thanks so much, Paul.
Mate, thank you. What a compliment. I'm blown away. I'm humbled. Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you for having me. And let's make sure we nail this in November.
Yes, let's do that. Thanks, Paul.
Pleasure.